Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Y whales. Again, wherever in the world you are, it's a consistent rotating issue that we can control everything except for time zones. And I'm always in trouble with somebody's wife because their husband is spending too much time, or spouse, it doesn't matter, whatever it is, too much time on Y whales at certain hours of the day because that's when the content's loaded. But I want to take a pivot, and we've got a really interesting guest today with Tom Ara and from DLA, and this is one of those interviews that I think is really important to have, and it's from a professional standard standpoint. And so Tom has been in the space for a number of years. DLA Piper is absolutely one of the predominant players in the game. And so, really, without me going too much into the depth on this right now, let's go ahead and pivot over to Tom. And Tom, will you give us some background? Kind of really prior to everything you're doing today, of kind of the the how you grew up in the space and kind of made your way over into wanting to work in Web3 in this capacity.
Sure. Well, Jay, thanks for having me today, and glad to be able to speak with your audience. I was actually quite flattered when you said interesting guest, because not a lot of people think of lawyers as interesting guests, although I guess it depends on what kind of lawyer you are and who you represent, including former presidents. But so my background, interestingly enough, I grew up working in the radio business, and I was in love with radio, and wanted to. My dream was to be a syndicated radio show host back in the early '90s. My misspent youth was all about radio and music, and that perspective changed somewhere along my college years, and was convinced to pursue a career in law, and really law and media and entertainment, because I thought, well, I love music, I love radio, I love entertainment. Maybe I can take a professional approach at it and pursue a career as an entertainment lawyer, as I did, and that was kind of the beginning of my journey that has led to where I am. Of course, those are the days of something called terrestrial radio, which probably most of your audience has never heard of or listened to, with Spotify and every other digital offering these days. But those were really, for me, the beginnings of seeing the transformation of the industry to what it has become today. And I feel incredibly fortunate because 25 years in this business, and most of that practicing as a lawyer, I've seen what most very veteran lawyers and folks in the media and entertainment industry would describe as probably the most transformative change in this industry. Uh, Probably even more transformative from going from 8-track to cassette, or videotape, or even the advent of television. Major shift
Well,
in
yeah, and
25
I'd really
years.
like to point out, on that note, there's no difference in any of the years that you've been practicing, leading into Web one, leading into Web two, or leading into Web three. The law is still the law, and I think that most people really just believe that because permissionless and open standards exist, that suddenly all this goes away. And the SEC would like to have a conversation with anyone that believes that, because that's just not the case. And Tom, I think you can speak about this really in a very much more prevalent manner. And I talk about Y whales and Web three, very often about we're still in such an early phase that most people don't understand the technology that is Web three, blockchain and cryptocurrencies. They don't understand it, and so what we have right now, from a very educational standpoint, I guess, is the technology driving the industry. And there's nothing wrong with that. It happens every time that there's a new technology. It happened in Web one, it happened in Web two, and it's happening now. But the reality is the only way to monetize some of this technology in a legal and global capacity is to come back to the legal foundations that exist to protect all the IP holders and everyone else around here. Napster 100% proved that people wanted digital music and movies. They wanted access to files of which that didn't exist, in their record store, that no one was making available to them. However, Napster's not around today in any meaningful capacity because Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora all went out and legally acquired these catalogs and then adopted the technology on top of that.
Absolutely. And I'm actually grateful to Napster because it helped me pivot my career away from just music to everything else. I was coming out of law school a few years before, and right, as Napster was happening, and I wanted to be a music lawyer initially, and then realized, wait a minute, the sky is falling because all the music is basically free. This can't be good for the record companies. And sure enough, there, for over a decade or more, the record business suffered and has finally, over the past few years, made a comeback. Thank you to, in great part, Web 2 and now Web 3. So, to your point, it's exactly the reason why I think my interest in the industry has shifted so much and leaned into it in a great way.
No, it's such an emerging asset class, and the technology is changing daily, and the laws really haven't caught up in any way, shape, or form. Because and where you can educate us
Correct.
a lot, and I hear from I probably get at least 2 to 5 pitches a month on here's how we're gonna NFTs and blockchain is going to change the music and movie and film industry, and it's fabulous, it's great, I believe them. But my first question every cross the time 100% is what does your lawyer say about this? And most
Right.
of the time they're like, well, we're permissionless, we're on chain, we're this. I go, well, that's what
Right.
everybody thinks. Right now it is the wild west, and I appreciate that from a build it and figure out what it's happened, break it, and go through that prospect. But what's your perspective on kind of the overall ecosystem today, which is chaos, to where we're going to get to mainstream adoption? What are kind of the few steps you think it's going to take?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, I think the moniker of chaos, as it currently stands, is apropos. I think, and by the way, notwithstanding that chaos, you've seen Fortune 100 companies wade into it and lean into it, which frankly is quite surprising. I mean, to some extent, I in the 90s and the Web 1 era, there were definitely a number of major corporations that were leaning into it. It wasn't just the startups, Yahoo, Google, Amazon, but it certainly, I think, carried a different type of risk than some of what's happening in Web 3 does. And so I think it is chaotic right now. I think a ton of settling needs to occur on a number of fronts. As you pointed out, people feel that once they go on chain or Web3, all of a sudden, laws and legalities evaporate. And look, the guy at the SEC has the same access to Web3 as you and I do. The prosecutor who gets a call from somebody who lost even thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands on an NFT phishing scam, has the same access to the NFT platforms that you and I do and the marketplaces. So the laws don't go away. In fact, they apply fully and completely, and the need to be cognizant of them and work and comply with them is equally important. With that all said, I think um, this is one thing I love about my job is there's a lot of things that are antiquated about this world, and the laws are squarely in that category. There needs to be updating of laws and regulations, and some of that is happening, but it's a bit slow, and the attention only comes when something goes wrong.
Or you get too big. When something goes really right as well as when they show up knocking as well.
True, very true. That's the other end, yeah, end of the spectrum, but that's
Yeah.
correct.
So, as a quick disclosure, Y Wales has never done any business with DLA Piper nor myself. So, this is a truly open interview here with Tom. And but really, I do believe that you should not write a single line of code. You should not, engage a single amount of resources in any project, whether it's Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, or anything, until you have sound legal advice. And right now, I think that there's two major shortages in Web 3. The first is developers, and the second is proper legal advice. I hear people all the time that say, yeah, I consulted my lawyer and this is fine. And I said, I'm not a lawyer, but I can promise you that's not fine. And before you go spend millions of dollars developing your protocol, let's go out and have a second opinion taken on that. What's your kind of run us through the roadmap of any entrepreneur in the space, what their mindset should be thinking about as they're wanting to develop a Web3 protocol, which may be entirely distributed and completely run by a smart contract that lives on the blockchain and no one touches it again. But how should people think about talking to a lawyer like yourself?
Sure. Well, I think if that comes to mind, or somebody like yourself is savvy enough to recommend to an entrepreneur to consult with a legal professional um, on their strategy and approach. Look, there's a business component to what every entrepreneur does, and there's a legal component, and I think they have to go hand in hand. And the earlier, the better. I can't tell you how many times, Jay, we've had to clean up very, very smart and successful entrepreneurs messes from an early stage, kind of being hasty and maybe trying to trim cost here and there. They've set up an entity in the wrong way. They haven't done proper elections for issuing shares, a variety of things from the corporate side. Well, the same we see now very much when it comes to people setting up DAOs or setting up NFT protocols or initiatives. A lot of that is, look, we'll just kind of get this going. If it's successful, we'll deal with it later. And I get that approach. I mean, it's certainly not. I can't argue with somebody for not wanting to put their life savings into my account to pay for legal fees. But look, I think there's a balance, and I think there are legal professionals who can work with early stage entrepreneurs, and we do. We have one of the best, my firm DLA Piper, one of the best startup and emerging growth venture capital practices in the country. And we work with those folks to find a balance. I think the discussion really with your counselor needs to be, do you understand the space? Like, I'm a techie. I was trying to figure out how to connect to peer-to-peer networks in like 1989. It was a joke, right?
Yep.
DOS prompt wasn't doing the trick for me. But I think you need a combination of either one individual or multiple individuals on your legal team that have tech understanding and experience, corporate understanding and experience, because you're going to need some form of corporate entity. You don't want to be a sole proprietor. Bad idea. We can talk about that, but you don't want to be the guy who is named in the lawsuit individually. You may be anyway, but at least you can get out by saying, "Hey, look, that's what I have an entity for in Delaware." And then lastly, if you're in the NFT Web3 space, I think my practice and my expertise, which I can tell you a little more about, which is the content world, is critical too. Because when someone asked me, it was a Variety reporter asked me recently, what did I think the prospects were for lawyers in the metaverse? I said it's greenfields, because everything in the metaverse is content.
Yep.
Somebody creates it, somebody licenses it, somebody acquires it, and I'm hopefully that person representing those people and or lawyers like me at my firm. So I think having someone with content savvy and expertise is also a very critical component of that representation team.
Yeah, it's clearly Web one. I heard a really great explanation from one of the higher ups at A16Z, and he gave a very we all do this every day. Like when someone says like, "How do you describe Web three?" I think all of us have our sayings, and I can't take credit for this one, but it was really good. Web one is read. Like you can consume content, but that's it. Web two,
That's
they
right.
defined as read write. You could read it, but you could also post on Facebook, Twitter, whatever the case is, and push data out there very, very easily. And Web three they describe as read write own. Which means that you can push and pull content, but you can actually own content and verifiably own things that are on chain. Now, look, we're still very early in this, but
Mm-hmm.
for someone that says like,
And I would just add to that, Jay, Web3, we'd also add disintermediation, I think is a major component of it,
yep,
right? which is really the idea of gradual removal of intermediaries, right? And this is why Facebook is launching Meta. They're an intermediary right now, but they want to be the platform where, you know, they're no longer necessarily viewed as an intermediary, but where you go to interact in a disintermediated world. And so decentralization and disintermediation, I think, is critical, giving users tremendous control over that experience on the web, on the internet.
Oh, absolutely. And so when we think about just some of the dynamic changes that now need to be thought of, because prior to this, if I put a website up on Web two, I just like, hey, here's a website, here's some content. I want to sell JPEGs. It's clear. The worst thing you got to worry about is number one, is it the content you created and that you own, and two, are you paying the taxes on any revenue generated? I'd say that those are kind of the two of the major things that you have to look at. Describe in Web3 what somebody needs to be thinking about when they say, I'd like to do an NFT project. I want to go ahead and put a smart contract out that's going to live forever, deploy X number of thousands of randomly generated characters, which is, let's pretend that they're original content. What does somebody need to think about, prior to deploying that on chain?
Sure. Well, I think the most important thing to note about smart contracts was one of my partners says, they're called smart contracts, but they're really not that smart. And reliance on them, I think, is a bit overstated by folks. But remember, smart contracts are code, so lawyers are not the ones who prepare those. I have never written code in my life, and probably never will. And so the smart contract is something that's you know part of the token and associated with that token on the chain, and what the lawyers will get involved in are all the actual acknowledgments and agreements that the participants in the activity, whether it's buying an NFT or joining a DAO or going on the metaverse, will accept or enter into, virtually speaking. So, for example, if you're selling an NFT, right, there are terms of sale. If I am the owner of that NFT, or seller of that NFT, and I'm selling it to you, Jay, uh, what are the terms of what you can do with that NFT? I mean, you see the BAYC model where they have license terms kind of posted on their website when you buy one. Some clarity, but not for lawyers. We'd hope for more. There are others that are much more detailed. If you go buy a luxury, if you go receive a luxury brand NFT, or you go and get an NBA Top Shots NFT, or one of these, very detailed terms. What you can do with it? Can you commercialize it? Can you put it on T-shirts? Can you open a cafe like somebody did with one of their Bored Apes, and go sell burgers?
But that's a
So all of these.
big, like that's a big misconception right now in Web3 is you own the thing, you may not own the IP. And so Bored Apes,
Correct.
I believe, is getting a lot of the value because they're saying, if you have this NFT, if you have this token, it's yours. You do whatever you want with it. There's no, only if you sell that token do they get the royalties off of whatever you sold it there. But there's no licensing rights, correct? You own that thing.
That's correct. Yeah. In fact, the Bored Ape license agreement is a license. You don't own the actual intellectual property. You have a license. The Yuga
Okay.
continues to own that. So, and by the way, so let's bury that misconception right here, right now, on your great podcast. When you purchase an NFT, you are not buying the underlying IP. You are buying code on the chain that evidences your ownership of a link to access that IP. That IP, if it's an image or video or some other form of content, is stored typically on a third-party site. It could be, AWS, it could be IPFS, it could be one of these other services, but that link allows you to access that. The artwork itself and the underlying IP remains owned by whoever created that. And unless, of course, the seller has said to you, I will deliver to you not only this token that allows you access, this non-fungible token, but I'm going to deliver to you the actual artwork either in physical or digital form and transfer in some writing, because under the copyright laws of the United States, a transfer of intellectual property requires a signed writing. Transfer that copyright to you. And that rarely happens. In fact, virtually never happens unless, someone has been legally savvy enough to figure it out and get that in place. And so people think, I bought an NFT, now I own the image. You don't. You might have a license to do certain things with that image as long as that link is active. But beyond that, all you own, I mean, I say all, it's valuable in certain contexts, is that token, which is code on the blockchain, allowing you access to an image.
And it's a very interesting world that we're moving into. And I'm sure you, as a lawyer, you guys are like looking at this thing going like, oh my God, I don't think people quite realize how complicated copyright law is. It's not as simple as just like click buy and like now I have, the access to make a movie of it or to open a burger shop with the name on it. Like there's still a lot there. You can't use the Bored Ape name without going back to them. You have an image, I believe, but there's a lot there. And then you add into there's did you follow the Seth Green issue?
Yeah, well, I was just talking about, yeah, exactly. I mean, the
So now you've
situation of
got,
phishing and fraud.
yeah, so now you've got somebody that believed that they own this. He did own this, in fact. It is his, spent immense amount of money building a film around his Bored Ape monkey, and had it stolen out of his wallet. Now we're entering the world of like, which is better, TradFi or DeFi? Because in a TradFi world, if somebody came in and stole your artwork off the wall or robbed you of something, you can file the police report. You can go back and say this, and this, and potentially you could get your IP back, or it never would have left in the first place. I don't even know what the law is right now. Like he's made the movie, he's got this, but he does not own that ape anymore.
Right. And the terms, without focusing too much on BAYC, the terms don't clarify whether, if you create something, a derivative, the license terms clearly allow you as an owner of a BAYC NFT to create derivative works, but do you retain the right to exploit those derivative works when you either sell that Bored Ape later or have it stolen, as was the case with Seth, and totally unclear. And look, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, making sure terms of sale and terms of license are clear and concise. And I think it's something that it'll be learning experiences. There's some pain that we're going to go through. We saw this with Web 1. We saw it with Web 2. Obviously, we saw Napster and piracy. Now we're in a day and age where people are willing to pay for a streaming license for music. 20 years ago, you told somebody, would you pay, $5 a month for music online? They probably would laugh at you. Now everybody has it. I think there will be some growing pains, but I believe in the platform. I believe in this being the future of many things that we interact with daily when it comes to content. Digital goods and assets have been here. It's funny, right? Because I was having this conversation with a prominent kind of influencer in the NFT space. I said, digital assets are viewed as a joke or fraud, but almost every one of us, and certainly our kids or nephews or nieces, buy digital assets and goods every day, whether it's in a online game or in some other context. And we probably do as well, and we didn't think about it that way. But NFTs are digital assets and goods, just like anything else. And I think there's some growing pains and evolution that still needs to occur, but I think we'll get there.
So let me ask you some questions just from my own personal point of curiosity, as long as I've got you and I don't have to pay for the legal advice here because you're on the podcast.
And I should disclaim that I am not giving legal advice today.
I was gonna say, this is
nothing that I say today should be deemed or construed as legal advice or creating an attorney-client relationship with myself or my law firm DLA Piper, but kind of here to have a conversation about generalities and
there's the real lawyer coming out now we know that you're a true legal professional. So there you
Self-preservation.
go. So in that perspective, as we're kind of talking through this, there's some major challenges that were caused by, kind of the web opening up. Prior to the internet, there was clear distribution rights. Then they were very regional, and we saw one of the problems that Napster solved was that people in certain countries now had access to files that were never available in their country, or were delayed by weeks, months, or in some cases years. And we saw the pushback of the industry, and the DMCA and everything else kind of push that, like squash that back down, because it's a very centralized approach to distributing content. So there's still, movies come out in the US before they come out globally, and there's been a little bit of flux there, but it's not like push a button and boom, it's around the globe. This is going to be a major issue in Web3, because Web3 makes no variance and differences between where somebody lives. That's one of the benefits of Web3, is it's ubiquitous globally. Do you believe that we're going to have a serious conversation, and it's going to have to come? I don't even know how you start having that, rewriting these copyright laws to say, like, the world is one globe. It's all one distribution model in Web3, or are they going to really be focusing down on these regional sectors?
It's an excellent question. I think there's not an easy answer
Yeah,
to it. I think there's going to have to be coordination and cooperation among regulatory agencies, at least across some major territories and districts. But I think the laws have definitely not caught up. The regulations have definitely not caught up sufficiently. I mean, the DMCA, as you noted, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which, among other things, gave uh, you know platforms like YouTube and Google and others a certain level of protection, to be able to have a free internet, so to speak, and something that the advocates of the free internet push strongly for, by having these safe harbor provisions, which don't immediately create legal liability if there's infringing content, giving you some period of time to take down that content upon notification by the copyright holder. Um, it's time, I think, for not just a revamp of DMCA, but a revamp of a number of laws, securities laws, copyright laws, and the United States has historically set great examples, right? Even trademark laws, for these advances that countries have followed, and I think we can do that here if we can act. We need the resources, we need the commitment from the highest levels of government to act, because we could be leaders in this and create the model, which is ideal, frankly. We don't want another nation to create the model, because it might not be the democratic model we love and propagate. So I think we should definitely take the steps to implement the appropriate modernizations of our laws to match and meet the world of, whether it's KYC, AML, anti-money. I mean, there's so many different issues that have to be addressed in this world. To your point, the purpose of Web3, in large part, this decentralization, is anonymity,
yeah.
right? And anonymity is hard to regulate. So you need really smart people, technology, legal, business, to sit down with the right folks and formulate at least what could apply now. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you an interesting anecdote. When I was in my days as a radio DJ, I was also a collector of records, collecting vinyl records, which, again, probably something most of the audience don't
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 age
own or
yourself too
know.
much here.
Although
Web
they're
three,
coming back into
these guys are
fashion.
all, like, 18 years old.
That's true. I was just reading an article that some big artist, I can't remember who it was, I should, but maybe Harry Styles or somebody, their album was number one, but they sold like some ridiculous number of vinyl records. That was, wow, I was just blown away. But in the late 80s and the early 90s, when I couldn't uh, uh, find the records that I wanted to play in my local record store, because I lived I lived in a part of the country where there really wasn't, there wasn't even a Tower Records where I lived, if you remember
Oh
those,
yeah.
with the yellow and red signs, right? And so this is like the Napster solve, right? I had found a contact through a friend who lived in London, who had this great record store, and he would get record songs, music, mainly 12-inch record singles that nobody else had access to. So I got his phone number, and I'd made an appointment with him to call him once a month on my speaker phone. It wasn't a rotary, it was an actual digital phone. And we would sit on the call for an hour, which would cost me a gazillion dollars. Because back then, a call from the United States to the UK was like $10 a
Oh
minute.
yeah, there was literally people holding wires together, going like, "Tom
That's
needs to
right.
talk to
That's
this
right.
guy. Hold it for a few more minutes there."
Exactly. And so I would literally sit on the phone with him, and he would play records for me on this, horrible, uh, speakerphone. I would listen, and I would tell him which ones I wanted. And after I was done, he would then ship me, these records for some exorbitant amount of money from the UK. That's how I got. But you know what? I was so passionate about it. I sought it out. I was willing to pay and do that. And I will tell you, the same concepts have applied at every stage of the web. And I think Web3 is the same issue. Like, you cannot stop technology. It will always prevail in moving and advancing forward, because people will seek it out, like I did those records on that call every month. And I think once regulators and lawmakers really recognize that, they'll act, and they have to act, because this is important
I,
to evolution.
and I fully agree. The U.S. was the leader in Web 1 and Web 2, and from my perspective, and all I do is talk to people around the world about Web 3. The U.S. is almost in last place. I mean, the U.S. is crushing innovation, and doesn't need to be. It's from a very archaic standpoint, and trying to apply laws that just aren't relevant, and they're very easy to manage. There's certain things that I won't get into on this call here, but it starts with more lawyers like yourself need to have a basic understanding of what Web3 is and what it isn't. The actual use cases of what blockchain technology and decentralization can do for society overall, and not worry about these fringe cases. To me, blockchain is the worst place to launder money. Like, it's the worst. Like, cash is great. It's traceless. It's completely anonymous. We see people
True.
that have stolen things on blockchain be arrested years later because there's such a clear trail
Right.
of the theft. And so, the ability to teach all lawyers, or really around the US and around the world, some very basic ideas around Web3, I think would absolutely be the only way that we're going to get to the lobbyists and get to the politicians and get to the higher ups to actually make clear common sense laws to say this is a net positive. but there's the clear, like, there's issues. There's a lot of issues, and it's
Yeah.
because there's no regulation. And then as soon as they say regulation, it's like, no, that's the wrong you're putting the wrong regulation on us now. And so the market goes crashes down because everyone's
Right.
got fear.
Right. No, I think what you're saying is certainly music to my ears. But I think there are folks who are quite entrenched in antiquated models that don't want to necessarily see advancement, and so they're not calling their local, you know, congressman or woman saying, we need to see movement on this, or pushing for advances. I think, look, um, the idea that um, crypto is a dirty word, or blockchain is full of, what was the internet when it first launched?
Yeah.
60-70% of it was porn, right?
Yeah.
And the reality was, I mean, the reality was that it took that kind of, content, for better or for worse, to advance at the light speed that it did technology to where it is today, because there was a demand for that. It had to get better and better. The speeds had to get faster and faster. And now that same content is probably a tiny fraction of what's on the web. And I'm not saying that we need porno in blockchain or Web3, but the point is, yes, is there illicit activity happening on Web3 and on the blockchain? Sure. Is it happening in the real world? Of course it is. There aren't mafiosos going, you know, to the local grocery store and asking for their weekly pay. Maybe there are in some places, but there's plenty of other types of illicit activities going on the web and in other forums that we can't, and to your point, tracing and tracking on a blockchain with a ledger a lot easier than tracing cash.
Yeah.
So I think there are definitely many reasons why we should embrace the world of
Yeah.
Web3.
So Tom, that was the greatest pivot ever of being able to get a lawyer to go down on this podcast. So I'm really excited about that. So let's circling way back around and bringing a little faith back into this whole conversation here. So DLA, like, because there's a drastic need. I mean, again, I talk to anywhere from a dozen to 2 dozen entrepreneurs every single week that are interested in getting in the space, that are trying to figure out their ideas, they're ideating. Um, talked and legal representation is truly one of the hardest things to find, even from that very base standpoint. So can you give just a really quick overview of DLA overall, as well as kind of the resources for any Web3 or Web2 looking to transfer into Web3?
The firm I'm a partner at, DLA Piper, and I co-chair the global media, sports, and entertainment sector and discipline here with my colleagues. This is one of the largest firms in the world, and I think more importantly than that, because I'm not sure that alone sells anyone on working with my firm or any firm, is that when it comes to technology and advances in technology, and particularly Web3, we have done an incredible job of amassing some of the greatest minds and experts, and bringing them together in an incredibly collaborative way. Um, like all the things we talked about that are antiquated, I think in a lot of ways the legal profession is massively antiquated. We still, work on hourly rates, and we have, a lot of antiquated things. But one of the most antiquated, I think, qualities of the legal profession has been the lack of collaboration I had seen over the many years among several other law firms I had been a partner with and an attorney at. And I think we've done a terrific job of solving that. And I got to tell you, it sounds very kind of cliche to say collaboration, but for a client's perspective, I will tell you, do not work with any law firm or lawyer who does not know how to collaborate with one another, because that same um, lack of ability to collaborate will transcend into their relationship with you. They will be talking at you rather than talking with you.
Yep.
And I think that's such an important part of what we do. And what we've done is we've taken technology experts. I'm not a pure technology lawyer. My business is media and entertainment. But we've taken technology lawyers, paired them with cryptocurrency experts, regulation and regulatory lawyers, like my partners in Washington, D.C., who literally wrote the book on cryptocurrency regulation, and groups like ours. And we've melded them together into working groups and focus groups to serve clients in a holistic and complete way. And I think that is, for us, I can't speak for other firms, is the biggest offering of a firm like ours, and working with us. Plus, we have a tremendous startup practice. So when it comes to entrepreneurs like those who are your listeners and members, we know you, we know how to work with you, and we welcome opportunities to really roll up our sleeves and start a new business. So we love that, and that's one of my favorite things about what I do is I get to kind of be there at the ground level and lay those early bricks with my clients who are entrepreneurs.
I love that. I love that. And it's, being able to kind of have that, like, look, you're a startup, you understand the fees, you understand the startup costs. It's just like roll it right in. And just because you're Web3 does not mean the startup, kind of check boxes should really be any that much different. I mean, a startup is a
It's
startup. I've
true.
been doing startups for 20 years. I've run startup contests. I mentor startups. I fund startups, and really there's some key check boxes of which I always again refer back. I'm like, go find the lawyer, go find your lawyer. It sounds like you guys have got a really great program together, and so I'm excited to kind of continue to learn more. But to kind of jump just a little bit more into some of the ideas that you said there, how do you guys, as a firm, have you guys done any of your own internal kind of dev work? Have you guys, thought about DLA kind of integrating themselves a little bit into the metaverse or anything like those type of
Sure.
aspects?
A great question. And then one of the greatest segues to a lawyer from an interviewer. Wonderful. And we hadn't talked
I
about
have
that
I have
earlier.
great
So
show notes. Listen.
yeah, no, wonderful, wonderful. We actually DLA has launched a token called Toco, which we've and you can find out more about it without getting into grave detail here. Um, uh, Online. It's TOKO, and we've so that for me. I mean, we're the only firm I'm aware of that's done that in a major way, and we've offered that token to everything from real estate investors in some territories to art collections to a variety of other uses, and that to me, and that we did that not like this year. We did that a year and a half ago, when when most people, the average person, didn't even know what NFT stood for, right? Other than no effing time, maybe. um, so you know, and then within my group, my business, as I've said, is content, right? Content, and more content, and media, sports, and entertainment, which is the sector that I'm responsible for, is we've known for years that convergence with technology has been part of our practice. I mean, it started long before the Web3. It started long before the streaming services. We were already immersed in, to use the appropriate term, in technology convergence with media and entertainment. And so it's been super important for our practice to make sure that our team is very well versed on that intersection, work with clients very carefully and closely, along with pure technology colleagues in deploying initiatives um, in the media and entertainment and sports industry. Because again, like the intersection, it's not like it'll happen or sometimes happens. That's it. Like it happens every day. There's nothing we do today, virtually, even live events, that doesn't intersect. I'll give you an example. A client of mine was a major streaming partner for the recent uh, EDC concert out in Las Vegas, and they did some really neat things, including, uh, speaking of Bored Apes, take one of the Bored Ape NFTs and send up 350 drones into the sky and uh, create a color drone NFT in the sky of that NFT. I mean, pretty neat intersection,
Yeah.
right? And now that'll probably become its own NFT. The picture of that drone NFT in the sky, a
An
derivative work,
NFT of an NFT.
an NFT of an NFT made of drones, right? And so, look, everything we do intersects with it, and we have really focused. The firm has focused. It's one of the key pillars of our firm's business is technology and that intersection with all areas, particularly sports media and entertainment.
I love it. Love it. So Tom, we've already had quite a bit of a conversation right now about a number of things, and things that you guys have deployed on chain. You understand all the ins and outs. We understand from a variety of standpoints that the laws really aren't ready for Web3, and they're not quite thinking about it. But that doesn't mean that there's not laws that exist today that are being applied to this. And so the one that I see most often is that somebody will create a NFT and they will attach some sort of utility to it. And utility is great. And I believe that all NFTs should have some sort of utility. But then they start talking about rewards or airdrops or returns on a specific investments, or that they're going to attach them to real estate. And that would turn it into a security. What's your thoughts around, how to avoid that or how to manage that process? What's some circuit breakers? And I know you're not a securities lawyer, but just really the thought process someone should go around to, because that's a whole different conversation from IP law.
Absolutely. And look, those issues present incredibly challenging predicaments for a number of the participants in the NFT space, including, by the way, these marketplaces um, that have to deal with the sale of NFTs. Utility, I think, utility is the only way the NFT marketplace survives. I think unless you're selling an incredibly valuable piece of art, doodles that my 5-year-old does are that fad is gone, right? It's already dead.
Yep.
But utility and evidence of membership or loyalty or participation or badge of honor, whatever you want to call it, whether it's DAO or NFT form, is where the future of loyalty, memberships, is where the future of NFTs are, and present form of NFTs are. You've seen like Gary Vee with VCon recently doing, the purchase of an NFT, giving the owner the ability to attend his VCon conference, and then he's been adding additional benefits that weren't even kind of promised. Those types of things, I think, look, it's the same version of like your Blockbuster card or whatever you want to call it. You pay your fee and you have access to certain privileges. And I think that's where the future is, and then some. However, presents major challenges, right? Because if I'm an NFT marketplace, OpenSea, or you can pick your favorite one, and I'm selling a utility NFT. And I was having this conversation with the person who runs NFTs for one of the major marketplaces recently, and there's a promised utility. How does that platform, that is kind of the intermediary in the marketplace in the sale of that NFT, assure that the seller delivers on that utility? And it's difficult, right? Sure, you can pick reputable partners to be in business with. You can ensure that the utility terms are clear and concise, but there's still some serious challenges around that. And then that leads to the issue of securities laws, right? Because if that utility is something that starts to trample or traverse onto securities laws, because that utility is viewed as an investment, you're participating in revenues. There's a famous Supreme Court case called the Howey test
Mm-hmm.
that basically says, it's a security if it's an investment of money. There's an expectation of profits from that investment. That investment of money is in a common enterprise, and any profit that comes from the efforts of a promoter or a third party are involved in that. And if you satisfy that test, you're security and you're regulated by securities laws. You either have to qualify for exemption or register that security. And many people in the Web3 world view that Howey test not applying because of that, because of that third factor of the test, which is, there's no common enterprise. It's Web3. There are dozens or hundreds or thousands of people. It's not like 5 startup partners starting a company and that's their common enterprise. The problem, I think, with that is that typically doesn't ring true, at least at the early stages of a NFT's life or a DAO structure's life. It may happen eventually where it's so disintermediated or decentralized that one could very solidly argue that Howey test doesn't apply. But I think in its current form, there's a real risk that with a lot of these, the test would apply, it would be deemed a security, and you're subject to regulation and have to apply for some form of exemption or register your security.
You answered that perfectly, and there was no right answer to that, because clearly it was, as you could tell, you're like, oh crap, look at what Jay's asking me now. The entire concept for anyone that's listening to this is, it is that complicated. Tom, this is what Tom does every day. He's got one of the biggest firms behind him that specializes in this, and there's no clear answer. Everything is a gray area right now. So I never give advice in a variety of ways, except for never trade on margin, and really always consult, just with a true legal professional, and having one or two opinions is entirely acceptable. And
You use the term, Jay, that is, it's almost in my everyday like lexicon, gray,
yeah,
right? Gray area, right? I tell some of my clients who are, you know, aside from the startups and the, you know, smaller companies, some of the largest companies in the world, brands in the world, and they want to wade into the NFT space. And I say, if you want to do this, you got to be comfortable with a lot of gray.
yep,
No black and white here.
yep.
Not right now, and I don't know when there will be, but you got to be, you know, these are the black and the whites, and the rest of it is gray. And if you're willing to play in gray, different shades of gray, then you know, this is for you. If not, then I think you should wait it out.
I think that's the exact point. Tom, what's the best way for the audience to get a hold of you, or to just reach anyone in your firm? Where's the best points of access?
Yeah, sure. Well, you can certainly go to our website, and we're going to be launching uh, a new and refreshed site very soon. But and you can find out about our various practices, including our media, sports, and entertainment sector practice. You could reach me directly by emailing me at tom.ara@dlapiper.com, DLAPIPER.com. And those are probably, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. Love to have you follow or connect with me on LinkedIn. I try to remain active on there, and I read a lot of it, probably more than I do the newspaper, which is a surprising shift for me. But you know, looking forward to connecting with anyone who has questions or wants to just talk metaverse, NFTs, and Web3.
Awesome. Yeah, fabulous. And I just looked on here. We're not friends, but I'm going ahead and requested you on LinkedIn. And Tom, really, I appreciate you stopping by, hanging out, and giving a little bit of your thought process around the space. Clearly, it's an engaging and highly volatile asset class right now, Web3, but it is, not without massive rewards. The space will come down over time, but those who really get in now and have a basic understanding of it, and learn over time. There's no rush. I always tell people there's no rush. There's no issues. But before you start a project, before you deploy capital, before you do anything, really understand what you're getting into, because the technology should never drive the business ever. And I'm very firm on that as well. It's not advice, but a thought process. But Tom, thank you so much. This is DLA Piper and Y Whales. We'll see you guys next time.